Avengers Endgame is directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, and this is going to be a spoiler-free review. So for those two people out there who haven't seen the movie yet, this video is meant for you. So, Joe and Anthony Russo have directed their fourth movie in the MCU, and this would be Avengers Endgame, and they did a really good job. And that's all I can say about the movie without spoiling anything. So, go and watch it. Hope you enjoyed my review. Now, this is going to be my spoiler-filled review where I get to talk about all the great things going on in this movie. So, get ready, we're going into it. Avengers Endgame puts a cap on 22 movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Cinematic universes have been tried by a lot of different studios because they just want to make money, but a lot of them have not been able to do it. DC is starting to get the hang of it. They really struggled at the beginning, but the MCU is the only one who has really been able to be successful at doing a cinematic universe. And throughout the cinematic universe, there have been 22 movies, so some of them have been really good. I love a lot of these movies, and then some of them have not been so good in recent months. But Endgame pays great homage to all the great movies that have been in the MCU up to this point, and it also does a great service to its source material in the comic books, and the Russos always do phenomenally at this. It can be very dangerous playing with characters who are such a big part of our childhoods and also just the last 10 or 11 years that we've been watching all of these movies and growing close to these characters. It's really great to know that these people take such good care of things that we love. Some of the best references that the Russos made to the MCU, one of them was really awesome when they're going back in time and they go back to the first Avengers movie in New York when they're fighting the Chitauri and Loki. I thought that part was amazing, and it just also paid a good respect to the origins of the Avengers. Another great part of the movie was when they're also there, you see Captain America get on an elevator with this strike team from his movie, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And that is where I really think that Captain America was truly born, the Captain America that we love. And it's where the Russos, who also directed that movie, they really revamped Captain America. And they made him really cool in that elevator fight scene where he's just punching people in such this small space. It's 20 people in this elevator. And he's just handling all of them. I thought that part was really cool in the movie, how they paid homage to that part of the MCU. Another great part of the MCU that they paid homage to was when Peter Quill, Chris Pratt's character, is on Morag in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, and when he is dancing and he's going to get the Power Stone. I just thought that scene is something that is just such a different tone than a lot of the MCU, and it was really cool how they were able to go back to that point also. There's also a lot of great comic book imagery that the Russos pay attention to, starting with Captain America's suit in this movie. It looks like some of his old suits where he had feathers, just very patriotic, alluding to an eagle. It didn't literally have feathers on it, but some of the markings on it looked like feathers. And also Iron Man's suit. It is one of his newer suits, and I think that it's one of the best ones that we've seen. And it also just kind of has the same paint job as his original suit where his arms are yellow and his body is red. I thought that was a really cool homage to his old suit also. There are a lot of other great comic book images in this movie that the Russos use, such as Thanos' armor in the garden after he has used the Infinity Gauntlet and he's finished with his work. There's also Falcon taking on the mantle of Captain America. That's also in the comic books. Also, Hawkeye becoming Ronin. That one was a really cool part of this movie. Captain America lifting Mjolnir. That was a fan favorite. We all love that part. Another time was when Captain America says Hail Hydra. That happens in some of the newer comic books that we've seen. It was kind of controversial, but they were able to get it into this movie just as a little shout out to today's comics. Another great part of Avengers Endgame was that a lot of characters that are a little bit hard to connect with, the Russos just made it really, really easy to connect with them. People like Nebula. I never really liked Nebula in the MCU. She's always just been really screamy, and I just didn't really like her. But in this movie, she's really awesome. Also, Hawkeye, he seems like one of the more low-key Avengers. He doesn't really have the superpowers of all the other ones, but in this movie, from the very starting scene, you get an idea of the tone of the movie, and you just get to see how human he is, and you really get to connect with him pretty much just as much as any of the other Avengers, if not more so. Paul Rudd's another one of those characters that really shows some acting depth when he is returning from the quantum realm. You just get to see his chops as an actor, whereas you usually see him in comedies, and it's really fun to see him like really go for it and show how much he can act. I would say really everyone as a whole had their best acting performances in Avengers Endgame, just because there was so much real estate, especially at the beginning. The movie starts off kind of slow, but it's really a time where all of the Avengers can show how the events of Avengers Infinity War has affected them in the snap, and how all these people, half the universe has vanished. And you just really get to see the emotional depth of these actors through the characters, and also just the effects that grief can have on you. They all really display different forms of grief, and I can get into that another time, but I just thought that part of the film just made us connect with them, and it just makes it so much better when you see them later on in the movie and later on in stories, when you have that sort of emotional connection with them. I thought one of the best scenes from the beginning of the movie was when Black Widow and Captain America were speaking to each other about how they're moving on, and just the sort of dealing with grief that they have to do. And then at that point also when Tony Stark comes in, from being lost in space and everyone thinking that he was a goner and he was dead, I thought that Robert Downey Jr. also had an awesome portrayal of just kind of losing hope and fading off in space. I thought that was a really moving part, and something that you don't really expect to see in an MCU movie. I also really loved the reveal of Professor Hulk in this movie. It's pretty shocking to see Hulk, this huge like monster who you see usually tearing apart things, just seeing how reserved he is, how he's like kind of become sort of like a hippie between him and Bruce Banner. I thought that that's another really cool portrayal of how he's dealing with grief. He used to just push down the Hulk and treat him as a disease. He kind of took that element of grief in his life, and he said, I brought them together and I'm like better for it. I'm not trying to avoid it or trying to suppress it. I know that it has become a part of me, and this is how I can really live my fullest self. And I thought that was a really cool message to hear also through his character. Also, it's just hilarious seeing Hulk in the back of a pickup truck. That was a gem. Thank you, Russos. Also, Scarlett Johansson in this movie as Black Widow. I thought that her character arc in the movie was pretty much perfect. I've heard a lot of people complaining about how she sacrifices herself on Vormir. I think it's really dumb to say that her character arc is lame, because one of the greatest acts of heroism that someone can do is to sacrifice yourself for a bigger cause than yourself, or to sacrifice yourself for your friends. And she does both of those things in this scene. And I thought that even though we don't get to see her in the big, fight at the end, or we might not be able to see her like past this point, I just thought that as a character, it's just like one of the greatest things that a hero can do. And it made me respect her a lot more than I have, in the past. I didn't not respect her, but I just thought that this part of her character just showed me a lot more about her, and I really appreciated that. Oh my gosh, Fat Thor, Lebowski Thor, one of the best parts of the whole movie. Another thing that some people aren't really cool with, because they're used to, seeing Chris Hemsworth climb out of the water and show off his big, huge muscles, and that's where, we pause the movie and just look at him in awe. But I just thought that it was really funny how they were, how they threw that in there, and also showed how he was grieving through all the things that happened through Infinity War, and, all the things that he messed up in the last movie. And I also thought that it fit his character arc really well, because in the last movie he was, really distraught because he had already lost his mom, he lost his dad in the Thor Ragnarok, and then also in Infinity War he lost Loki, and he was just kind of like at his lowest point. And finally, when he gets the chance to avenge Loki, and he hits Thanos in the chest with his new Stormbreaker axe hammer thing, and he takes his time instead of killing him right away, I thought that, it makes sense that he messed that up, and that he would fall into kind of a, very depressed pit where he's just, eating and drinking, and he can't really get a hold on his life like he had before. I thought that it fit his character really well. I get that it's kind of a bummer to see him like that. I loved Thor Ragnarok. It's one of my favorite MCU movies. And how awesome that they revamped Thor also. He used to be sort of like this elitist guy that spoke proper English and was a little bit boring, I'll say. after Thor Ragnarok, they really gave him character, and they also made his powers really come from within him. I get how it's kind of jarring to see him like this, but I thought it was also balanced with his character of being really funny and showing a different side of him and a different stage of grieving for him. One of my favorite scenes with Fat Thor is when they're trying to make a plan for getting all the Infinity Stones, and they have him stand up and pretty much give a PowerPoint presentation on where the ether is and at what point in time they had it, and he is explaining it because really it's like one of the low spots of the MCU. Like Thor the Dark World is considered one of the worst MCU movies, and it's just funny hearing him explain like his relationship with Jane, and also just explaining that like the ether is like this amorphous blob of a material that went into Jane, and like just hearing like watching everyone trying to listen to him talk and like, oh yeah, like totally, like we totally understand. It's like we find ourselves talking with crazy people sometimes. They go off on tangents and we're just like look around at each other like, this person's crazy. I thought it was hilarious seeing them react to Thor that way. I just thought that was a great part of the movie. Captain America in this movie, he picks up Mjolnir. That part of the movie was so badass. That like everyone in the theater that we were watching, we saw it, like I saw it Thursday night when it was opening, and everyone was just like, yeah, when he did that. We all freaked out, and it was just like such a great part of the movie. I think that's something that's going to stick around for like a long time when we have kids and we're showing them like, oh, we'll watch the MCU movies with our kids, we'll watch all of them, and then when we get to that point, we'll be like, and that was like one of the greatest parts of my childhood. I'm not a child, I'm a man. Big man. Anyways, I just thought that how they closed out his character at the end of the movie was pretty much perfect. Going into the movie, I was positive that Captain America was going to die and he was going to be the one to sacrifice himself to beat Thanos. But really, I think that it was really cool how they closed it out, how they had him stay back in time and live his full life as an old man. Part of the reason why he thought he was going to die was that he doesn't really have, outside of the Avengers, he doesn't really have a connection with any other characters besides, Winter Soldier and the other Avengers. But he can't really find true happiness there. It's like he fights, bad guys and, he works in S.H.I.E.L.D., but, it's not like he can't find his full fulfillment there. I just think he couldn't find his full fulfillment in the time where he was, other than just like being a hero. It was really cool to see him sort of retire and go back to living his best life with Peggy. And, just hearing him say at the very end, like, they ask him how it was, and he just says, it was beautiful. And it just reminds us of what really matters in life and what we should really be striving for as, not chasing money, not chasing success, but like having a family and having just people around you that you love. It was just like a really cool thing to see him live out in his life. I just thought that was a perfect send-off for Cap. And now, moving into Iron Man. So I thought that it was a really cool setup going into the end of the movie with Iron Man. Just as he's coming back from being stuck in space and seeing his breakdown to, jumping forward 5 years, and 5 years later. That was insane. That was awesome. But seeing him living in a cabin with Pepper and his new daughter Morgan, I just thought that was a really good way to move his character forward from where he was. It's just great seeing him interact with his new daughter Morgan and just really being the man that he's meant to be, because he's always struggled with being immature in the MCU or just like being really full of himself or arrogant. And it was awesome to see him, settle down and have a daughter and just be really more responsible. And also just the line where she says, "I love you 3000." That was great. I also love the scene between him and his wife Pepper. All throughout the MCU, if you kind of remember any sort of like progression for him, Pepper was always like feeling the brunt of his actions to save the world or to keep tinkering with his suits. She was kind of discouraging him from that. And then finally in this movie, he has stopped messing with those things. And then Pepper knows, like, you need to help out these people. You need to help them solve this problem and hopefully, reverse this. Because if you can't do this, you could never rest. You know that, you could never move on with yourself. This is who you are. You are a hero. And this is your duty. I thought that was a great part of his character progression. And finally, for Tony Stark, at the very end of the movie, when Thanos finally gets the gauntlet back and he says, "I am inedible." And he doesn't say, "I am inedible." He says, "I am ineditable." He says inevitable. But then Tony Stark, he steals all the stones out of his gauntlet and he puts them onto his, suit, and he's like, "And I am Iron Man." That was awesome. Just hearing that line again from Robert Downey Jr., we haven't really truly heard it since 2008 in Iron Man. And that was like one of the greatest scenes in, the recent years of that time, where he just fully embraces who he is. And Tony Stark in the comics doesn't really have a secret identity, but it was just like such a cool way to end that movie, and also to use it in this movie to end off like his character arc, where, looking back to where he started to now where he is, and just how he's laying down his life for, all of his friends and all the rest of the Avengers to save the universe and fully fulfill like his duty that he always felt of protecting the universe. And he's always been affected since he went up in the wormhole in Avengers 1 by the vastness of like the dangers that are out there, and how he felt the responsibility in Age of Ultron to create a suit around the world to save people. And then, that put people in harm's way, obviously, as well as in Civil War, having to sign the accords of, signing all the superheroes up because he believed that's what needed to be done to keep people safe. And then finally for him to just do the right thing and like sacrifice himself in this time to, bring everyone back together. I just thought that was just like an awesome way for him to go out as a character, and also just for Robert Downey Jr., all that he's done for the MCU and for us fans. I thought it was a great way for him to go out. So I can go on and on about things that I loved in this movie. The things that I loved were just like awesome, and there were just a couple things that are like, doesn't mean that this movie is wholly perfect. They do a lot of time travel stuff that doesn't fully make sense to me, I'll be honest. In this one, they say that time is, this long string, and when you put things back in time, or that when you go back in time and you take a stone out, it creates this branch reality for those people who are in that time who had the stone taken away for them to live, and that doesn't get reversed until they put the stone back. It makes sense to me that you would have to go back in time again and put it back, but it also doesn't really make sense to me that if you were going back and back, that people around in that time wouldn't notice. That's kind of weird that someone from the future is there. So there are just like a couple flaws like that in the time travel thing, but I think that through the flow of the movie, you can like easily move past it. Like, this movie is 3 hours long, just full of things, and the fact that the time travel thing isn't perfect, it's like, well, hey, it's not really possible. So, it's something that you can move forward with. My biggest fear of this movie was having Captain Marvel in it, and how they alluded to her kind of coming in and saving the day. And, Kevin Feige, who is the head of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's the big producer in charge of it all. He's been talking about how powerful she is and how she's the most powerful Avenger, and that she's going to be the face of the Avengers moving forward and the face of the MCU. And then the fact that Brie Larson is playing the character, and, she's just a very unlikable person. She's been, talking crap about a lot of people who watch her movies. And I think that that's like no way to treat people who are fans and like want to be fans, because you're just kind of not really respecting how, we want to like what people make. I go into every movie hoping that I like it. I don't go into a movie hoping that I hate it. I went into Captain Marvel hoping that I liked it, and unfortunately I left not liking it. But, I don't really look forward to Brie Larson in movies. I thought her character is just like really boring, and I didn't want her to come into Avengers Endgame and feel like we needed to have her save the day, because that would belittle all the characters in the Avengers. And, even just having her there being like the most powerful of them all and just like talking down to the other Avengers, I thought would just like do a total disservice to like all 22 movies that you made before. Fortunately, she's only in this movie for like 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you so much for limiting her time in this movie. I would be so much happier if she wasn't in it at all, but I can't get what I want wholly, so I think that it's a good easy medium having her in there for just a little bit. But yeah, my favorite part of the movie is when Thanos grabs the Power Stone and hits her and she goes flying somewhere else. I thought that was great. Anyways, Avengers Endgame as a whole is just a great time at the movies. It's going to be one of the biggest movies like ever. It's already passed up all like the highest grossing movies except for Avatar. It's got that one in its sights. It's just such an awesome time for us to be growing up in the MCU. This is a time where this thing hasn't been made before, and we're really getting to experience a part of our childhood now. And Avengers Endgame just puts a great, awesome cap on that saga. And I'm going to give Avengers Endgame a 9.5 out of 10. Anyways, guys, if you like this video, please subscribe, hit the notification button, leave a comment below. Tell me what you thought about Avengers Endgame. I'd love to talk with you down there. And as always, come back here for more videos later. I'm Jared Gilster, and I'll see you next time.